Some discussions may touch on legal and tax topics, but nothing contained in these episodes should be considered tax or legal advice. David and I are not accountants nor licensed attorneys. Please consult with your tax and legal professionals for advice on your own unique situations.
Hey, welcome to the Did It Close podcast. Myself, David Dirk Schneider, and my partner, Bryan McCann. Look forward to entertaining you guys with some fun stuff, business stuff, and just having a good time. Today, we're just kind of getting to know each other a little bit better. We spent some time talking. Bryan asked me some questions, and now I'm returning the favor. So we'll go ahead and just jump right into it. Bryan, we've known each other for a while. We got to know each other through the coaching, so tell me a little bit about you, and I'm going to dig in a little further.
Yeah, so I kind of have a non-traditional commercial real estate background. So I grew up Wheeling, West Virginia, went undergrad for computer science, and then went into law school. I kind of had this crazy idea, like every 16-year-old, I knew exactly what I was going to do with my life. I was going to get into cyber patent law. And then I got into my second year of law school and realized that I absolutely hated everything to do with patent law and kind of was lost. And I was a volunteer firefighter at the time, actually. And so we used to get together on Saturday mornings and grab breakfast. And, I was sitting there kind of like lamenting. I'm like, man, I had this great plan. Plan went away. I'm lost. I'm in my second year of law school. I don't know what I want to do. And one of the guys kind of put me in a headlock in a joking way and said, I have an idea for you. I think you're going to join the FBI. And I was like, interesting. I was like, why? He's like, I kind of get your personality. I think you would enjoy it. There's no guarantees, but you should apply and kind of go through that process. So I did that and graduated law school. And, I graduated law school. I remember June 5th was our graduation. And June 20th, I got a call that said, basically report to Quantico. And so that was the backstory, and reported to Quantico and was in the bureau for until 2017. Got into real estate kind of like almost by accident. So in the government, they move you around a good amount sometimes, and kind of got moved around, and used to keep the house when I got moved around. So started renting, then started kind of investing on the side, loved real estate, was looking to potentially transition out of government. I kind of got to do all the fun stuff in the field. And as you progress into management, kind of like less and less of the fun stuff and more of the paperwork. And I kind of hit that like 10, 11 year mark where I'm like, well, I'm either going to stay and go for a full retirement, or I'm going to leave and go into the private sector. And kind of made the decision to move into the private sector. So in 2017, left. I was thinking about going on the principal side, and somebody said, you should get into the brokerage side. And I think you'll learn a lot. You'll understand. You'll see a number of deals. And if you want to do some deals on the side for yourself, you can go do that. And that ever since 2017, and kind of been running. And, here we are 7-8 years later, and love it. I think, what I love about it is it's constantly changing. It's a high pace environment. You and I were talking about that before the call, right? We say sometimes, we appear calm, but a lot of times we feel like ducks on the pond because our feet underneath are just going like crazy, trying to keep things together, keep deals moving forward. Yeah. And then the people you meet, right? And I think this is what attracted me. Commercial real estate is, and David, you're great at this, right? Is you turn your clients into friends, and and your friends into clients. And I think that's what I love, is you get to know people and you get to know who they are, and then you get to do 10, 20, 30 deals with them throughout your life. So it's not just one deal, and it's a transaction. We're not in we get paid through transactions, but we're not in a transactional business. We're in a relationship business, and I think that's kind of a huge thing for us.
Yeah, I like that relationship business 100%. You said a lot there that I want to unpack, and I'm going to start kind of earlier on in that. And I want to hear more about you being a firefighter while in college. I mean, most kids in college are out partying, doing whatever, and you were doing firefighting, right?
Well, yeah, I volunteer. So, it's a great question. I don't really know. I think, I have a personality. My current wife will joke about this. She goes, Bryan goes all in on something, right? Like he gets interested in something and then he goes all in and kind of dives into it. So I think, I was living in the suburbs around Pittsburgh where I live. I was living in the area called North Hills. Most of the fire departments are all volunteers. So there's not a lot of professional firefighters. City has professional. So I kind of moved in and I was like, well, I would pass every day. I would drive to and from my apartment and pass this volunteer fire department. And I would see people down there, and it looked like an interesting community. And I think too, at this point in my life, I was like, I had done a couple different things on the volunteer side. I used to volunteer and coach cross country. I was a huge runner back in the day. So I was kind of passing by, and a few times I'm like, it'd be interesting to see. So I just stopped in one day and I was like, hey, like, I don't have any experience. I don't know anything about this, but do you take people who just off the street that just want to help out? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. They're like, you can
it's volunteer.
Be a non-fire. Yeah, we're just looking for volunteers. They're like, you can be a non-firefighter, right? And you can, just help out around administrative, books, that stuff, or you can go the firefighter route and be a volunteer firefighter. And I was like, oh yeah, I want to do that. I want to do, a little bit of an adrenaline junkie, right? Like obviously some of the things so when the tones drop or, the siren would go off, you get the little pumped up in adrenaline. So I like that. So went through the training. This was my second year of law school, and did that, basically going into my second year of law school, did that and got involved and loved it.
So did you actually go through like a fire training or academy of some sorts? I mean, they can't just throw the average person out there and say, go fight fire.
Yeah, before you can go into a structure on the fire, like that's actually fire, you have to go through 80 or 90 hours. I can't remember, but it's the same fire academy that the paid Pittsburgh department goes through. We're in Allegheny County, so went through the Allegheny County Fire Academy, and there's a good number of volunteers that go through, but also some paid career guys that go through. So I think it was like every Saturday for 9 hours for 10, 15 weeks back in the day.
All right. So after firefighting, went to law school and then finished law school and then went into the FBI. I got to hear about the FBI Academy. I mean, as you know, I spent time in the Marine Corps, and so went through Marine Corps boot camp and, FBI Academy. I mean, assume you're staying there full time for a certain period of time, or is it, go home on the weekends, or what's that like?
Yeah, it's more of a gentleman's course, to be honest. I was actually, I kind of was going into it more with the mindset of like, hey, they were going to wake us up in the middle of the night and, PT us. And it really wasn't that, right? It was really a, 8 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You were there. You were expected to stay there overnight. The first 3 weeks, you had to spend every night there, but then after that, you could go home on the weekends. And they've changed those rules. I don't know if those are still the rules that are in place today. When I was through, it was 18 weeks. I think it's gone as many as 21 weeks, down to 16 weeks and varied. But yeah, you would go and you were expected to be there, Sunday through Friday evening. And if you wanted to leave on the weekends, you could, and as long as you were back, Sunday night. So.
Okay. So, even though not a lot of PT, and I'm sure still got to do a lot of running and stay in shape. I mean, you're still law enforcement, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting. So the class defensive tactics, right? So we have a defensive tactics instructor, obviously have all the blocks you could think of, firearms, DT, and then, the legal side and all this, a lot of classroom side as well. Yeah. And different defensive tactics instructors focused on different things. Some very much concentrated on the physical fitness part of it. So they would, do a lot of PT with their class. Ours did not. He said, it's not my job to get you in shape. That's your job, right? You're supposed to show up here in shape. And if you're not, you better get in shape fast. He's like, my job is to teach you the tactics that you need to survive when you're out on the street. And so we spent most of the time in that class and not doing physical fitness, but doing handcuffing and weapon retention and ground fighting and things of that, which I loved. And then I was a big runner, still try to be a big runner, not as big as I used to be. So, there was a group of us that would go in the evenings or in the mornings, or, we did our gym and our PT time usually outside those core hours for the most part.
That makes sense. I think that's better too, because then you learn, right? I mean, I agree 100% with him. It's not his job to get you in shape. The reality is you probably wouldn't have been there if you weren't in shape, first off. And then it's your responsibility to stay in shape after that. And then they want to teach you and help you grow.
Well, and I'm sure in like we have a physical fitness test, right? So I think it's day 2, we take our PT test, right? And and they always joke, it's the one test that the answers to going in, right? You know what's expected of you. You know what the score is, and there's really no excuse to not do well. You had as much time as you wanted to prepare for it. So were you prepared when you showed up?
And I'm sure there's always some that aren't.
Always.
Yeah. So you get out of the academy. What did you actually do in the FBI? Like, what was your role? Where were you at?
Yeah, so I figured I had a computer background and a legal background. That's where I went in, and so I was thinking I was going to get assigned to a cyber squad. Not that I wanted that, but you don't really get too much of a choice. You kind of just get told where you're going to go. So when I got my orders, my first office was Cincinnati. When I opened my orders to go to Cincinnati, it told me I was going to be assigned to the Joint Terrorism Task Force, the JTTF. So I worked counterterrorism the first part of my career and loved it. I got a Joint Terrorism Task Force. We really were a task force that was made up by state, local, and other federal agencies that usually was housed at the FBI. So it was the FBI office. But, I was in Cincinnati. We had, Cincinnati PD, a lot of the other local PDs that were nearby. We had Ohio State Patrol. We had Secret Service and an ATF and other federal agencies. So I got to work with all of them and learned a ton, right? So I was, 25 years old, straight out of the academy, getting tossed in to do this, and got to work some amazing things and learn from some amazing people, which I'm sure as we go through this podcast, some of the names of those individuals, and for the most part, I'll probably just use their first names because some of them might still be in and be doing stuff.
You might have to kill me if you told me their names.
Well, you're a Marine, man. Everybody's an infantryman. I know you could pull a trigger, so
No, that's and I like that kind of stuff, and that's because of my background. That intrigues me. The tactics. I think that would be a cool job doing counterterrorism, like right out of the academy and jumping into it, especially working with all the different law enforcement agencies, and would be a really cool experience going in.
Yeah, I think, when I look back on the time, obviously working the cases and stuff was great, but it's really those interactions that you learn so much through the different people. And I was so thankful because, local agencies do it different than state agencies that do things different than federal agencies, and much, kind of translating that into commercial real estate. We're not always the same, right? We do things differently depending on the deals, to whatever the case may be. And I think being able to kind of have the humility to step back and look at a wider aperture and say, hey, what can I take away from all these different things of it and make myself better and, make what I'm doing better, I think is really important. So, I think we talk about this a lot, right? Like, you and I don't have all the answers to commercial real estate. We've done a lot of deals. We work together. You and I are involved in mentoring and coaching on an ongoing basis. And I know a number of our weekly calls, we're bouncing ideas off of each other sometimes and learning from each other. And I think it's great.
Yeah. No, I would say that, having the wide variety of background and experiences is really what helps me be a better person, a better business person. I can see a lot more than just singularly focused on commercial real estate all my life. I've had all the different things involved. In fact, I got a very good friend and a client that he's of the belief he will go work for someone for free if he wants to learn a trade, just so he knows that trade. He's like, it's worth my time to go and do that and basically work for someone for free just to learn how to, replace an air conditioner, to, fix a hot water tank. I mean, he owns apartments, so that kind of stuff is important to him. And so I've always thought the same thing. If I can learn stuff, that's invaluable, in those experiences.
Well, it's funny you mentioned it. So just last week, I have a very good client who called me up and he said, hey, I have a kid, he's 18 years old. He's getting ready to go to college, really wants to get into real estate. He's like, would you grab coffee with him and just chat? I'm like, I'm happy to do that. Right. So kind of much like you, right? It's so many people have taken their time in their lives to give me, mentorship, guidance, and advice. If I can ever pay that forward, I'm so happy to do it. So I was getting together and we had this exact conversation, and he said, we were talking about, real estate and stuff. So I said, listen, your greatest asset right now is your time, right? You're young, you have time, you can trade, and you're going to trade that time for different things, right? We all do. We trade our time as we get older. We trade our time a lot of times for money. And then a lot of times later on, we trade our money to get time back, which is an interesting cycle, right? But I told him, I said, you're going to sit here, and I gave him an example, and it's almost kind of similar to the example. I said, somebody might come along after your first year and offer you an internship, and they might be willing to pay you $30 an hour, right? Or whatever it may be. And you dive into it, and maybe all you're going to be doing is entering data into a spreadsheet, right? Maybe you're an analyst somewhere, and nothing wrong with that, right? Like, it's just like, that's a great way to learn and stuff. There might be another person, if you're wanting to be in real estate, who says, hey, I own a bunch of apartments. I can only pay you $10 an hour, but you're going to be going on every single maintenance call. You're going to be doing all those things. And I said, if you just look at it, somebody's like, oh, $30 an hour makes sense. But what is the education that you're getting? So you're trading your time not only for cash, but the younger you are, it's almost more important, the education that you're getting for that time, because that's going to translate into so much more money down the line. Absolutely. I think some people lose that cycle.
Well, that's, like we talked about before, my experience, running apartments on the apartment side, I didn't know it as an education back then, but I look at it now. It was the best education I could have had for apartments, for selling apartments now, because I know what it's like to be in the owner's shoes. I know what it's like to run the properties and every full aspect of it. And that's something I wouldn't give back for anything. So,
right.
All right. So after FBI, go into commercial real estate. Where'd you start off? And did you jump right into apartments, or where did you get, what was your path?
Yeah, so I understood I had started buying. So I had not only owned single families that I had lived in, and then I started buying, 6 units, 12 units, smaller stuff that I could buy myself. So I joined a smaller boutique shop, got in being a generalist mostly, because at the boutique shops, a lot of times you're kind of like more of a generalist. So it was a small shop, kind of did that. I did apartments. I gravitated toward it because that's what I knew. And then got called a couple years in to go to one of the bigger shops where I did exclusively multifamily in apartments on more of the institutional level, and learned a ton, and eventually moved over to 2 other shops, and that last one being Colliers, which is where I am today. And, as we talked, you've recently joined, which when we decided to do this, which people are probably thinking, oh, this is a Colliers thing, which it isn't. When we decided to do
we weren't
this,
even together at the same company.
Yeah, you had no idea. Yeah. So it's like we kind of got to know each other. And then obviously when changes happened, came over to Colliers, and very glad to have you on the platform. But yeah, it was just kind of moved through and kind of done that. At my current position, I do oversee other investment sales as well too. So I oversee office and industrial and retail sales as well. But my primary focus is on apartments, and actually looking to build the team out to cover those different food groups, as we say.
Gotcha. Okay. And then, how we met was through the coaching, which, you're now a Mossmo coach too. Why do you do that? I mean, people ask me that all the time. While it does pay, your hourly rate for coaching compared to, selling apartments is you'd make more selling apartments. My point. Why do it?
Yeah, well, one, I think coaching is hugely, hugely important, right? Mentorship. It can take a formal, it can take an informal role, and I think it's funny, you can't see it. It's off the screen over to my left. Is I have a whiteboard in my office, and I write down some things, and some are just my to-do list, and some are like my big things, right? My 3 big goals for 2025 are on there, right? One of them is launching this podcast, so that's always want to be working on that. Another thing is my mentors. I actually write them down on there, because when I look at their names every day, I think of some of the lessons and the things that they've told me. And, and I think that's hugely important, because, and when I say mentors and coaching, it's interesting. The thing that sticks with me the most is the ones that, didn't praise me or tell me, or they were the ones who usually pulled me aside and had a really hard conversation with me. They basically, an old boss of mine told me, a good mentor can chew you out without you knowing that you're being chewed out, right? So it's like, so that was a good thing. But got into that. Obviously the coaching was huge. David, you were my coach. It's how we met, right? And amazingly impactful and hugely changed my business around. When I had the opportunity to do the coaching, not only is it extremely rewarding to help others, as we kind of talked about, like I had mentors, if I can pay that forward, I want to. But you also, in the selfish way of it, is when you're helping or mentoring, you're learning so much. It makes you crystallize your thoughts. It makes you really analyze what you're saying and the advice that you're giving. So while it is hugely rewarding and I love to give back, it also fulfills a selfish need, is it makes me a better person by doing it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I always say, I can't stand hypocrites. And if I'm sitting there coaching one of my clients and saying, you should do this, you should do that, and I'm not doing it myself, that makes me a hypocrite, right? It holds me accountable.
Right.
And what the coaching has done for my career, I mean, it's just, I can't even describe it. It's been, my career from prior to coaching to now is vastly different than it would have been without it. So.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like every time, and I'm sure we'll talk a lot on this podcast about prospecting, but every time I ask those that I'm coaching, how's prospecting going? The thought always goes in the back of my mind, did I make all my prospecting calls this week? And some days you're like, no, I did it, because it's one of the harder things to stay consistent with.
It's what most people don't like to do, unfortunately. I mean,
right.
But that's why those that prospect well usually do a lot better. I mean, it's just a fact.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go back even further. Tell me, what was it like growing up? I mean, family, kids. I mean, I think you said you lived kind of in rural Pennsylvania, right?
No, so grew up in Wheeling, West Virginia. So it's about an hour outside of Pittsburgh in West Virginia. Grew up there, only child. So no real brothers and sisters, but, grew up fine. Had a lot of fun, got to go hiking, ride bikes, but it was definitely more, it's not rural, like it's not like true country, but it's closer to country than it is city, right? Like, I mean, Pittsburgh was the big city, which was an hour away. And, I think our town maybe had 50,000 people in it. I did go, like, high school. I graduated, I think, with 28 kids in our class, 28, 29. So I think at the time we only had 97 kids in the whole school. So definitely on the smaller side, because of that, played 4 sports in high school, not because I'm that athletic, because I am not.
A lot of, yeah. I mean, you got to have multiple kids playing multiple sports to fill the teams out.
Well, it's kind of like the volunteer firefighter. It's like, we need volunteers, right?
Yeah.
we'll take some warm bodies. Like, you might not be the best football player, but if you can get in somebody's way and maybe pretend to block somebody, we'll take
like
you.
That. So I know the answer to this, but obviously growing up around Pittsburgh, a Steelers fan?
Absolutely. Although
always?
I think ever since Pirates, Steelers, Penguins. I mean, a true sports fan. Maybe it's because I'm a short guy. Maybe it's because Pittsburgh doesn't have a professional basketball team, but horrible at basketball. Never really got into basketball, but love the other sports, and just always been that way. So now take clients to Steeler games and friends to Steeler games. So enjoy that, and Penguins, and it's a great sports city. Kind of a like trivia out there, like Pittsburgh really is a neighborhood from back in the day of actually different ethnic groups. And there's actually a couple books written about some of the different sports. And a lot of times the only time the ethnic groups would come together was for a sporting event. So like boxing, for example, they would each you'd have the Italian neighborhood and the Irish neighborhood and the Polish neighborhood, and they would always take their champions, and then they would come, and that would be the big when the community would get together. So Pittsburgh's kind of always been built on competition and on the history of sporting. And I think it still carries through today.
So is there still a Pirates?
Yep. Yes. Yeah.
Man, I guess I hadn't seen them play in so long. I like baseball. I don't watch a ton of it.
Was it a small shot there, David? I mean,
I used to love their uniforms. I mean, I used to watch baseball a lot more when I was younger. And one of my kids he's incredible at baseball. In fact, we assume he'll go to college on a scholarship. But I don't know. I hadn't really seen the Pirates play in a while.
It's actually a funny story. So Paul Skeens, right, who is the kind of the pitcher phenom, and is also famous because whose girlfriend is Libby Dunn, right? So he plays for the Pirates this year. So I always joked with most of our apartment owners. I said, if we need to like up the rents, I'm just going to start a rumor mill that Libby Dunn is living there. And, because she posts so much, like hopefully it'll start trending.
There you go. You never know.
Yeah.
So what's new for 25? In case people watch this later, hear this later, we're tomorrow's New Year's Eve, right?
Yep.
Yeah, as we just finished up Christmas, we are rolling into 25. Working on, I assume you're working on as well, but kind of planning, goal setting, and all of that. Should be wrapping it up, but right in the next step. What's new for 25? What's exciting?
So really pumped up for 2025, right? I mean, 2020, 2021, right? We're really boom, kind of like boom years for multifamily, right? And then we kind of had that pullback. And, 2023 was obviously bad for a lot of people's business. 2024, I've heard mixed reviews, right? We had a good year in 2024. I've heard others have not, right? And just kind of seen, but I think there's some optimism. There's some energy. It seems like common equity is coming back, where before it was like all the common equity was like, oh, we now have a pref fund, but we don't want to invest on the common side, right? So it was kind of everybody was trying to de-risk, de-lever, and kind of move into that. So 2025, we're excited for. Seems like the deal volume is going to increase. Personally, really excited. We look at different avenues of our business, right? And I know we'll talk a lot about kind of the way we look at things and coaching, and kind of break down the business into kind of like those 5 tranches, right? Human resources, finance, operations, sales, and marketing. And for us, 2024 was always was all about looking at operations and how to make sure that those are streamlined, structured, and efficient. And I'd say we did probably 80% of where we wanted to get to. Still some tweaking to do, but 2025 for me is all about marketing, and hence why we're sitting here talking, right? I mean, we talked about a podcast. I actually remember when we first met, that was a goal for you and it was a goal for me. And I think a couple months ago, we chatted, like, hey, did you do anything with the podcast? No. Did you? It's like, no. It's like, well, why don't we do this?
Yeah. But when you come together, you got people hold you accountable. It makes you move things forward.
Exactly. Right. So I was like, we had a call today, right? I was like, I could have blown off trying to record this, and it probably wouldn't have been as interesting, me just staring at the camera by myself either. Yeah. But so that's a big thing for me. Hiring on the team for other asset classes, as we talked about, so that we'll talk about specialization. Think it's hugely important. Want to make sure we're not getting distracted by other shiny objects that are great opportunities that can bring in revenue, but having the right people, to do that. And then also looking at different markets and how do we build out the platform and expand that to different markets. So those are kind of the 3 big goals, wrapped up is what I'm looking at 2025, and excited for hopefully what commercial real estate is going to mean for all of us in 2025.
So if you were to let me borrow your crystal ball for a little bit, where do you see, rates, transaction volume, whether that's good, bad, transactions go up, foreclosures happen? I mean, what do you see happening in 25? You got the whole mix of stuff. Again, if people are seeing this later, I mean, new election, Trump, really shocked everybody by winning, pretty overwhelmingly. A lot of different policy changes that some people say are going to have a big impact. Some people are going to say won't. So it's really kind of the open slate. So what's your projection?
I like how we're recording this, so somebody can definitely quote it and make a liar out of me when I'm wrong. So that's
that's what usually. I mean, we all got to guess.
Yeah. So I've used this analogy probably too much in the last 3 months, but I think it holds true. I think 2023, especially and into 2024, was kind of like driving down a road filled with potholes with really dense fog. And what happens is everybody freezes, right? So they know there's danger out there, but you can't see the danger. I think 2020, the late part of 2024, 2025, we're still driving down the same road. It's still got potholes and but the fog's starting to lift. So we can see it. So we can see where we need to swerve and where we need to move. And I think that's what's allowing people. So common equity is coming back in. They're still being choosy. They're still trying to avoid those potholes, right? They are just not throwing money at anything because they think that the market's going to go up forever. But there's definitely more transactions that are being done and will be done because they have a sense of that. That also coupled with the fact that because everybody was frozen for so long, they actually need to have deals happen, right? So permits, we could talk about multifamily permits and construction permits, like they dropped. They were at an all-time low. So that's going to take 2 years. Like when that delivery cycle comes in 2 years, we're going to have a slower delivery cycle. So people were like, oh, 2024, we still saw a ton of deliveries. Well, that's because those deals were being done in 2020, 2021, and 2022. They're being completed now, right? And we did not see that now. So I think you're going to start seeing a ramp up of people, development start picking back up, transactions where a lot of people were, they basically extend and pretend, right? So they were kicking the can down the road, and sometimes that road's kind of running out. So it's like, we're going to have to sell, we're going to have to refi, we got to do something here. So I think transactional volume will pick up. I think more deals will be done. I think rates are staying. I think what we've done is remove volatility. I don't think we're going to see rates drop crazily. I think we're kind of in a band, right? And between, I say this, and we might be outside the band even today, right? Like between like a 3.75 and a 4.5, right, band. I think we're going to trade in there at least for like the 10-year Treasury. But that doesn't necessarily mean the same, right? Just because we're getting rate cuts, everybody's like, oh, I'm getting rate cuts, the rate's going to drop. Well, that's not true, right? Right, like a lot of times those rate cuts are already built in. But also when you're getting rate cuts, the concern that we're getting right now is inflationary environment. So when you get inflationary environment, right, you're going to see those rates and the spreads at the bank go up. So therefore, it's kind of, even though the Fed fund rate might drop, I think you're seeing some of the other things.
The market's pricing in different opinions than the Fed. I mean, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's we'll have to do a December 2025 podcast and see if
we'll have to do is every year make these predictions and then look back and see how was the year compared to what we thought.
Yeah. So how about you? We'll combine this in. What are your predictions for this year as well?
Really have two. I think one of two things is going to happen, and I think that I'll give the doom and gloom scenario first, right? Which is rates don't go down, right? And you named it, extend and pretend, which is I was very active back in 2008 and 2009. And that's what you were seeing then, right? You're seeing banks just, extend, pretend, let's wait and see where the market goes. But at some point, they couldn't do it any longer, right? If you're a bondholder, on a loan and you keep giving them time, but those bonds are due. At some point, you got to just say, enough's enough. Sorry, I got to have my money. Right. And if that starts to happen, you're going to see a lack of liquidity and, people can't make those, can't put the money up to refinance it. And you're going to start seeing foreclosures. Right. I hope that doesn't happen. But there's a lot of signs that say that. And, and what's really so hard now, too, is the federal government, more than they ever have, try to steer the economy by manipulating it and doing different tactics and quantitative easing and all that. You would have never heard of that 10, 20 years ago. And so they could steer stuff, but if they don't, I could see that happen. What I hope, and what I think is more likely, is I think rates will come down a little bit. Like you said, I wish they would come down. If treasuries came down to 3.5, I think floodgates would open. We'd start seeing transactions and everybody'd be happy. And a lot of these people that were kind of just holding on, waiting, are going to get bailed out. But I think as long as treasuries can get 2 or below 4, I think we remain healthy and transaction volume does happen and it's higher than 24. I just think if rates continue to go up, that's what's going to hurt. But I don't think it's going to be a gangbuster year. I don't think it's going to be that doom and gloom year. I think it's going to be right in the middle. I think there's going to be a little more relief with rates. I think, I'm hopeful that, what some of Trump's plans, help pick up the economy and stimulate growth. And if that happens, then I think I think inflation may start coming down and rates come down. And that's what I hope. But I think it's going to be slow. I think it's going to be really slow. Nothing's going to happen overnight. We're going to, in fact, I think at the end of the year, we're going to look back and not realize we did better than we thought we would do until the end of the year. And you finally look back and say, okay, this is a year. Because there's not going to be that one event where it's going to be like, man, rates just dropped and transaction volume just spiked. I think it's just going to be slow, steady, but improvement, right? Which anything better than 24 is good.
Yeah. And I think, like, I don't, we're when we do these podcasts, right? Like, we're not advocating one political group or whatever the case may be. We're trying to kind of just say, but I think
this is what it is.
Very telling, right? Yeah. It's like, this is the facts. Like, there's a number of things this year that'll go through Congress that will have impacts, right? So, I mean, you look at things, if we do a mass deportation plan, that could have labor costs go up, right? I mean, that's just the fact. If we do put tariffs on, that could have an inflationary effect on materials, right? But we could, I mean, on the other side of the coin, right, as you said, if we can stimulate the economy, if rates come down, if some of the tax cuts get extended, if there's the OZ funding that is coming up in legislation, right? Are some of these things going to get extended? I think it'll be very, very interesting in the next, and hopefully we'll know in the next first 6 months of 2025. Once we see the new Congress and the new administration kind of sets their agenda, we'll kind of see where that's going to go.
That's what people don't realize is a lot of times Congress has more of an impact on that than necessarily the president. I mean, they're the ones at the end of the day that are passing the laws that go up. I mean, that's, I mean, presidents anymore, it seems like they make everything executive orders, but generally speaking, it's Congress that sets the way. So
yeah, we have a lot of bills expiring at the end of 2025, right? I mean, yeah, exactly. And so I think that's going to be hugely impactful to see what happens with those and kind of moves forward.
So, well, let's say now we'll look back 2025, look back at this one and say, all right, how far were we off? And the reality is we're going to be off. I mean, we're going to look at something and say, I never would have known that meteor was going to hit, in this area, or I never knew that we would become friends with the people that lived on Mars. And now we have joint economies. I know that sounds crazy, and I don't really believe that. But I'm saying is there's always these black swan unknowns that you have no idea what they're going to do, where they came from, and they impact it, whether it's good or bad.
I mean, I remember the end of 2021, right? We were talking about the Pittsburgh market, and somebody said, "What's your prediction?" Very similar. I said, I now caveat everything, right? So it's like, I said, absent anything crazy in the world, right? We'll see over $400,000 a unit in Pittsburgh and a sub-4 cap, right? We were trading some stuff around 4.2. Stuff was creeping up into $350,000, $360,000, $370,000 for Class A product. 2 months later, right, we have Russia invading Ukraine. We have, Treasury starting to take off and fly up. We did not see that $400,000 a unit, nor did we see a sub-4 cap. Now, right, we're fighting to see sub-5 caps. So that was kind of interesting. So it will be, and I know we'll probably do a show to kind of talk about the formats and stuff. And I know we're going to have, a mortgage expert on routinely to kind of talk about rates and what's happening, because that's so impactful on the commercial real estate industry.
Oh, big. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a money game. I mean, you got to have money, and that's what determines, is money flowing or is it not? When money flows, apartments sell. When it doesn't, nothing happens.
Exactly. I always tell people, it's like, people are like, oh, commercial real estate, are you more similar to like residential real estate? I said, we're probably more similar to stockbrokers, because we almost trade financial instruments more than we're trading like just like a house. I was like, because really it's just, we're trading financial instruments that have to be secured by real estate is what we're really doing.
That's a good way to put it. Absolutely. Yeah. So, well, I appreciate it. Getting to know you a little more, and then you getting to know me a little more. We've even learned a little bit about each other, even though we've known each other for many years. Was kind of fun experience.
Yeah, sounds good. So appreciate it. And hopefully we'll see everybody at a closing table out there sometime in 2025.